Okay, we're back to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 6, titled Attila. This episode is written by Aaron Wagoner and directed by Uda Breshowitz. Dylan tells Mark and Helly about discovering Irv's directions to the exports hall, but the plan to go get them is interrupted when Mark starts flashing back and forth between his innie and his outie. After giving control of the floor to Miss Wong, Mr. Milchek gets some reps in on placing paper clips the right way and then aggressively starts practicing using shorter words. In a private moment, Mark confesses to Helly that he and Helena had sex at the Ortbo. After some initial shock, Helly decides that she wants some of her own memories like that, and she and Mark sleep together in an empty office. Gretchen visits Dylan again. She appears to be falling for this version of Dylan. The two share a very intimate moment. Then she lies to outie Dylan, telling him that the visit was canceled. Irv goes to dinner at Burton Field's house, but at the same time, Mr. Drummond is going through Irv's things at his house and finds a list of Lumen employees. While at dinner, Irv learns more about why Bert got severed, but it's giving a confusing timeline of his employment history with Lumen by his husband Fields. When Dr. Ragabi tells Mark that they should accelerate the reintegration process despite some risks, Mark angrily leaves to go eat, but at the restaurant, Helena confronts him, but in a friendly and flirtatious way. This causes Mark to want to follow Ragabi's plans to speed up. They perform the procedure in his basement, but Mark passes out as Devin arrives at his house. Pretty chaotic day at Lumen with all this going on. Some jumping back and forth with Mark, a little bit of everybody, and it's sort of a half and half between Innie and Outie in this episode. What sort of stood out most to you as you watched this one?
I mean, it really stood out to me how there's a definite kind of theme in the episode of romance slash is this a throuple
Yeah,
slash is it cheating on
yeah.
your husband if you make out with your husband's innie,
Yes.
all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, you
It,
got
it
some pretty,
definitely seemed like a through line where like everything was around those kinds of dynamics.
yeah, I like sort of the subversive questions it raised about the morality of severance as regards to relationships, as regards to religion, as regards to lots of things in this episode. But you're right, sort of relationships or the intimacy between these characters really, I think, stands out in this one.
Yeah, because you've got then the Bert and Irving dinner is a central scene. We'll talk about more details more here,
Yeah.
but there's that, and then Dylan and Gretchen and how we read that, and then there's Mark the innie and Helly the innie and Mark the outie and Helena the outie, and that scene, which is entertaining. Um, so lots of stuff like that. We were talking about the official podcast with Ben Stiller and Adam Scott a bit before we started recording. And one thing that stood out to me in talking about this episode, Ben Stiller kept saying stuff about thinking about, what permeates was the phrase he kept using, like between innie and outie.
Hmm.
Um, Interesting language. I do think that that is, I mean, it's always been a question of the show. Again, how do you think about the innie versus the outie? Are they fully separate and distinct persons? You know, in some sense, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, you could definitely make the argument, yes, and I have done so. Um, but in another sense, well, they're sharing the same body, same brain.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it has always been a big question of narratively, where will they take that? There are
Yeah.
some possibilities that would bother me, and others that would bother me less. But maybe it'll be largely left open. It just stood out
Yeah.
to me.
I just liked watching that dynamic in this episode. Maybe even though we're supposed to, I think, get more connected and more emotional about Helly and Mark, I really enjoyed watching it in the Gretchen and Dylan circumstance because it's
Mhm.
almost like you can think of it as Gretchen is maybe falling for the version of Dylan that maybe was so smitten and fascinated with her at the beginning of their relationship. And now he's this, discontented, a little bit. Um,
That scene actually made me
no,
really sad.
yeah, yeah, it really did. It
Yeah.
really
Okay.
did. Sort of like I'm like she's missing that, or that's the way it used to be, and then so much so that she feels a certain way, I guess, guilt about it that she doesn't even tell him that she visited him.
Yeah, so to answer my question, she feels like she cheated on her husband
Yeah.
with her husband.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, but it also made me sad for Dylan. It made me sad for Audi Dylan,
Yeah.
even if we haven't spent a whole lot of time with Audi Dylan. Insofar as it's easy enough to kind of put things together and get how Audi Dylan has struggled to, find a calling, find something he's into, and that's what led him to get severed
Yep.
because he just needs to hold down a job, you know. And you could imagine if he'd gotten the job at the door factory, eventually things would have gone, he would have gotten
Yeah.
disgruntled or like stupid. We're making doors. Why are you taking
Yeah.
this so
Right.
seriously? You get enough of his personality, and I can relate to that. Then he's got 3 kids, and of course he loves his kids, but it's just like I'm led to feel like Audi Dillon is just kind of caught up in and almost overwhelmed by life and its stresses in a way. Um, and so he wants to do things like go buy a new car because that would be exciting,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Whereas as any, I don't know, just gets to be like free from that. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, the whole thing made me a bit sad.
And even just, I think this was verbally communicated that any Dylan says, if you find something like I've found something that I'm good at down here, right? He knows he's got value and worth down there. It doesn't seem like the Audi feels that even a little bit.
Yeah, and of course we can recall Dylan's always been the one who gets excited about the prizes and the perks and the waffle
Exactly.
party, but just the fact that he won the waffle party.
Right. Right.
Um, let's jump around a little bit. We started talking about this question of the relationship between the innies and the outies,
Hmm.
and there are a few things I want to talk about with the dinner at Bert's house. But what do you think about the religion aspect of this? I mean, I was kind of surprised, but
Yeah.
then it made me think in a couple of directions. That Bert and Fields say that like Bert got severed because they went to church, to Lutheran church, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know how relevant it is, but maybe worth mentioning because I did think from a religious point of view, the claim that the innie is a separate, distinct soul, kind of weird. Wouldn't have expected that.
I absolutely would not have expected that. That I found the justification for it from Fields and from Bert. I mean, just fascinating to say that. I mean, what I felt like was implied was Bert says I was a scoundrel, so I did a bunch of bad things early in my life,
Uh-huh.
but then got severed because they heard that the church, the Lutheran Church, believes that any side of you is a separate soul and therefore can be saved or brought to heaven to be with God because of because of that separation. However, that they did not get at church, and this is someone who is religious. This is always one of my biggest hangups is that they did not get at church that you know there is something called forgiveness and grace, and there are things that you can do your outie self to earn that as well, right? And that they have to go through that procedure in order to accomplish what they're hoping will they'll get in their eternal life or whatever.
Yeah, but let's follow that out because you're absolutely right, and I don't know that much about Lutheran doctrine in particular here, um, as opposed to Catholicism or what have you.
Hmm.
I don't know if you might know more than I do, but yeah, definitely. I mean, it's this like the central idea of Christianity in terms of seeking forgiveness, salvation, and so on, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so is there, I mean, I know that there are some notions, at least in like Catholicism, of what is it, the cardinal sin that's unforgivable or something like
Hmm.
this,
Hmm. The
Uh,
turning your back and turning your back on God. That's the unforgivable sin.
so okay. One possibility is that Bert has committed sins that are so bad that he feels he could not be redeemed. The other possibility is he's still a scoundrel and he's not going to stop being a scoundrel. And
Yeah.
I prefer the latter, right? Because
Yeah.
they're saying rather than Audi Bert, you know, um, showing that contrition and seeking, absolution and all of that.
Yeah.
No, Adibert is going to keep being a bastard. So the only way he could possibly get into heaven is to like pick up on this loophole, whereas any could get in. And
Yeah.
like, Fields is on board with that.
And I can't help but think, I know we're going to get into this, that idea of the horrible things he has done must and somehow tie into this idea of how long was he or has he been at Lumen and what is he doing or what has he done, right? This idea
Yeah.
of the sort of fuzzy timeline, because yeah, one of what little I do know about Lutheranism is you are saved by faith alone, not by deeds or things you do or things you try
Hmm.
to fix, but your faith and your belief save you. And so it's not like that. It's like, okay, well, the innie can go and do a whole bunch of good stuff, and therefore he'll be saved. The outie can make that turn and that pivot if they want to. There must be something that's keeping him from doing that, is what I think you're saying as well.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go there, right? That it it's interesting because I'm tempted to say Fields lets it slip, but he doesn't so much let it slip as make a point of bringing it up, right? Because they're telling the story of why they started calling each other Attila.
Yeah.
They don't really say why, just that it's like a, you know, metonymy is the word, right? It's a metonymic move from Hun, right? Because
Yeah.
Attila the Hun. So they called each other Hun. Now they started calling each other Attila. Okay, haha. I don't have any more to read into that, but it opens up the space where Bert says they started doing it about 10 years ago, and Fields makes a point of saying, oh, no, it was 20 years ago, because I distinctly remember 20 years ago having drinks with you and your
Yeah.
partner at Lumen.
Partner at Lumen. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of details for it being wrong, or he gets, well, I forget what he says at the end. He gets fuzzy or he forgets things sometimes. A lot of details there.
And then, like Bert, doth protest too much, as it were, in terms of trying to say, um, apologies for Fields. He gets confused. He brings it up again as
Yeah.
Irving is leaving. Because apparently, as Irving knows, severance has only existed as a procedure for 12 years, or at least that's the official story.
Yeah.
But I'm not questioning that part so much. I rather tend to think that Bert worked at Lumen as an unsevered employee.
Yeah.
Maybe he's in a fairly high position, and that's part of where he's done the bad, nasty things that will make him never go to heaven. And then that the church story is true,
Yeah.
and he decided to become severed. Um, at that point, which also raises the question of whether Bert still works for Lumen. What do you think?
I am of the opinion. So we need an explanation for why Bert has been following Irv around in the car,
Mm-hmm.
watching him, make these phone calls at the payphone. Is it just because he showed up and wants to know what's going on, or is it because he sort of has more of a mission or intention of following him around? So he's just curious, or he's got a job to sort of figure out what's happening here. And now that we sort of have heard these things, and we've always been confused about, did Irv also have these experiences at Lumen, right? He knows about the exports hall. He has these visions. He's seen things before. Yeah, I'm now more in the camp of they both used to work there, perhaps together. Um, Fields knew this guy. Why else would Fields be comfortable with him coming over? But does Bert still work there? I'm not sure. Have a thought on that one yet.
The perhaps together is tricky because the only way, I mean, I believe that they don't really know each other now. So the only way that I could buy that they previously worked together as unsevered workers is with a further wrinkle to the brain stuff Lumen can do to you,
Yeah, they
which is
could.
possible. Which is possible.
If Irv worked there before, it's they have wiped his memory enough to where he doesn't remember that time in his life and just has flashes of this hallway.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Personally, I think, unfortunately, right? Like, because I would love it if the story was just that Bert was following Irving because he's curious and, has this quirk, wanting to know why the guy showed up at the store. But I find myself feeling pretty confident that Bert still works for Lumen and has been keeping an eye on Irving and further invited Irving to dinner so that Drummond could go into Irving's house and poke around.
It does create a convenient opportunity for him to get in there to know that he's got a couple hours to go searching through things. And I mean, do we see him looking at anything more or looking for anything more than just that directory of employees that he has? I'm not sure exactly all he's looking for, but they certainly focus on that for quite a bit of time.
I don't know if I think Drummond was looking for anything in particular,
Yeah.
but if you think about him finding that, I mean, we've seen this before. It's in and of itself, I think, worrisome from Lumen's point of view that you would have Irving compiling a list of severed employees and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, my sort of big theory, which I mentioned seeds of on the podcast last week, and I talked about this more in my article on this week's episode. People want to check that out at tvobsessive.com, because the starting point was this Trotsky stuff, right?
Yeah.
The show made me start thinking about Trotsky, but that has led me in the direction of thinking that with Irving at some point, he was pretty high up in the company,
Hmm.
and maybe Irving becoming severed was not his choice.
Yeah, and that idea we're talking about with Ben Stiller of what permeates sort of the commitment and devotion to Kier and Lumen permeated because, in the first season, at least until what happens with Bert, where he's sent away, he is the most devoted employee it seems that they have.
Yeah, so like, remember when Miss Cobell was gonna go in to Lumen and then got spooked and ran away?
Hmm.
Maybe it's because she like knows what they did to Irving and was
Yeah.
afraid they were just about to do that to her,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Something like that.
Which speaking of four episodes out of six now with no Miss Cobell, so I remain curious how they're planning to integrate her into the plot, if at all, over these last four.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume she would come back into the story in some way. Narratively, it
Yeah.
makes sense for her to be absent, um, because she got fired and
Yeah.
ran away.
Yeah.
But where is she? What is she doing? I'll be curious to see whether they check in with her in Salt's Neck or wherever she ended up going,
All right.
or if the next time we see her is when she returns, um, to Kier. The town's named Kier.
Town is named Kier. I'm curious, for lack of a better term, whose quote unquote side she's going to be on when she returns, right? She's clearly spooked and has not gotten what she wanted out of Lumen. Does she care more about now the severed employees that she was responsible for on the floor? So just sort of curious what her role will be if and when she does come back.
Right. I mean, I would tend to imagine something in the direction of staging a coup, but could it be successful? Is Milchek getting disgruntled enough that he's also going to turn against Lehman? But
Yeah.
to be clear, like, look, this is part of, not to keep talking about Leon Trotsky too much, but part of why that reference is sticking for me is it was precisely
Yeah.
after Lenin died that Trotsky was the threat to Stalin. And Stalin won the power struggle and was like, we got to get rid of Trotsky,
Yeah.
right? Exiled him and then ultimately had him assassinated even in exile, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes me worried about Irving if that parallel is something the creators have in mind, because the implication would be, well, exiling Irving is not enough, firing Irving is not enough, you got to go kill him.
Yeah. I do worry about that. I worry about that as well. I worry about, if I'm power ranking the fates of people I'm worried about, I mean, Irving is certainly at the top of that list because of the fact that he is what he has done, what he knows, what he might have been, who he might have been in the past. Yeah, I'm concerned about Irv.
On the flip side of that, too, who is he calling on the payphone? We've got a couple possibilities, I guess. The whole Mind Collective, kind of doubt it. They do seem just like,
Yeah,
wackos, whatever. Ragabi or someone associated with Ragabi,
Yeah.
right? She's not associated with the Whole Mind Collective, from what she said at least.
Yeah.
Other possibilities. I'll mention briefly. I was revisiting the Lexington letter, which came out what, after season one or in the middle of season
Mhm.
one. I don't remember exactly. And I don't know that there's a whole lot there to read into, but one thing that probably is worth working in is how in that letter Peggy has this theory that somehow the data she was refining caused a truck to blow up, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like a truck of a competitor of Lumen.
Yeah.
Was it Dorner or something like
Hmm.
that?
I think so.
And I don't know what I make of that in general. I don't want to get too hung up on it right now, but just to mention, like, all right, well, maybe another possibility is that Herb is calling them or something like this, or I don't know. I don't know what the other possibilities are. I presume we will find out.
I presume we will too. I don't want to also rule out that he could be in communication with Cobell, that Cobell is somehow communicating with him on what's happening there. We'll again, I don't know. Just all options are on the table, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. And then last option, yeah, would be someone we've never met before. There's also a possibility. All right, good. So we've talked about that quite a bit, but I think that is a big,
Yeah.
part of this episode. We still need to talk a bit more about the Mark and Helly stuff, I think,
Yes.
and
And the the Ragabi
yeah, the
brain surgery in the
reintegration.
basement part of the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of made me jump there. What do you think of the fact that it's kind of like all of a sudden Ragabi wants to go fast? She's been wanting to go real slow to him. God, take it easy. Keep
Yeah.
drinking your disgusting drink, and
It's
now she
almost
wants
like
to go fast.
she saw some signs of success with Mark, some signs that things were happening the way they should, and she wants to, put him in the advanced course all of a sudden. It just you're right. It's contrary to what she said at the beginning and may result in what we see here that happen at the end of the episode.
Yeah. The best I've got is thinking about Mark losing time
Yeah,
because that is disturbing. I mean, it's disturbing from a personal point of view if you lose
yeah,
time like that. But also, we don't know exactly how that workday ended, if you think about it, right? We cut
exactly.
from Miss Wong attending to Mark, and then he starts flashing, and then all of a sudden he's in the basement. So, besides the fact that it freaks Mark out, maybe we need to think about how Ragabi does have the concern of them being found out and that
Yeah,
undermining things. And
and
so if
and
Mark's starting to go, nutty at work and losing time and stuff like that, there's a practical level concern to that as well.
yeah, and I found it interesting. It seemed like at the end of last episode, episode five, Mark was jumping back and forth between place, right? His presence was in the basement, then in the office, and then back and forth. Now, as we've clearly seen, he's jumping back and forth in between time, it seems like, or losing that time. And so you have to completely be disassociated and have nothing in between there. So it just seems like I think regardless of something at the very beginning about, oh, soon we'll see things start to smooth out or even out or start to work the way that it should. And so maybe that's just a sense of sometimes you're going to feel like you're one place, but you're really another. Sometimes you're going to flash to where the other side of you is, and you can't account for that time. It just doesn't seem like, again, all we have is PD to go by, but it doesn't seem like this is working the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah, and PD is not the best, most hopeful example here of reintegration.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just to follow up on what I was saying, like if Mark said Ragabi or something to Miss
Yeah.
Wong, well, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but speaking of PD, who died, um, do you think that Ragabi's done this with anyone else? At one point, Mark says you've only
Hmm.
done this one time before, and she doesn't push back, but she has claimed that she's gotten better at it and so on. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
That's a good question. We don't know if there's any other surrounding Lumen offices nearby that she could be working with people, but we don't know of anyone that she could have been practicing on, I guess.
Well, there's Dario, there's Gwendolyn, there's Mark
That's
W.
true. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
But there are also any number of people in that specific Lumen office, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
met the whole mammalians do durable department. There were a lot of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there were a significant number of people in O&D. And then I don't know if there are other departments. I feel like there was some number might have been mentioned in season one that I believe was bigger than three, but
Yeah.
we've only encountered those three, you know.
Yeah.
But certainly there are people around where it would be possible. Um, I find myself doubting it though, because you know, I don't know where would it fit in time wise between
Yeah.
Petey and Mark? How would you
Right.
not be seeing like why wouldn't Ragavi still be more concerned about keeping tabs on anyone else she's done this with, where she
Exactly.
seems content to just live in Mark's basement?
Yeah, she's living with Mark, and you're right. I mean, we sometimes get lost in the concept of time here. Between Petey dying and where we are now, it's not a long period of time. Maybe a couple of weeks,
Yeah,
three
I was gonna say
weeks.
a couple
It's
few weeks.
not a long period of time for her to go experimenting on this with other people.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we can pin it down, but it feels like it's just been a few weeks. Um, I've had some other thoughts this week about time, but we'll save that for later. We already talked about it before a bit. We were talking about the car models and stuff like this, and you floated the theory, but some other stuff has been percolating to me. I got in. Well, I'll go ahead and mention this. I kind of sort of got into an argument on someone's YouTube video in the comments because
Okay.
this person was trying to claim that it didn't matter. They're like,
Mm,
oh, don't worry about what year it is or the time stuff or the fact that
yeah.
Mark's ID says he was born in 1978. My point was simply like they could have very easily not shown us that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And then further, as you realize the passage of the UUR that Rickon changed, it's about the clock on the wall.
Oh yes. Yes. I
And
knew what
that's
you
the
thought.
same
Yeah.
passage that Mark read in the season one finale. It's about the clock on
Mhm.
the wall. So it seems like there's a lot of indications in the show that make us they want us to be thinking about the question. Come on. Yeah. Um, I don't have an answer to the question.
Yeah, that is one that needs to be on the list of they should and likely will provide an answer for why and where and when.
Yeah. Talking about it more maybe doesn't fit the best with this episode. I think it was last week or rewatching last week's. Another just little inconsistency kind of thing. When they were wrapping up Irv's
Yeah,
funeral, the clock on the wall said 1:05 or something. And then Milchick goes to his performance review. That's more than 4 hours long.
it would include lunch if it goes more than if it goes more than four. Yeah,
And then he's back on the elevator at 5 minutes to five. Done that up.
I don't know, my friend. Yeah, I don't. It's like I think you're right.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sure we'll find the opportunity to dig into that more on a future podcast. We need to talk about Mark and Helly more before we wrap up, at
Yep.
very least. Where do we even start here?
Yeah, interesting. Maybe we could save the well, let's do this. We're talking about the time with the Ragavi, and so let's do Audi, Mark, and Elena, and then we'll end with any Mark and Helly. So
Yeah,
why do
we've
you
taken this
think?
episode very out of order.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
out of order. So why do you think Elena approached Mark at the restaurant? What was her intention there?
Can it be two things at once?
Yeah.
Because I think she has the hots for Mark.
Yep.
That's real. Um, but also um probably checking in on Mark's Audi from the perspective of her role at Lumen. I think probably both. I don't know. What
Yeah.
do you think? Because it,
I-
it is sort of possible that she's there wholly unofficially and no one knows.
Yeah. I think that's very true because in one sense it was a very flirtatious conversation at times. Then in one sense almost insulting and condescending, and getting his wife's name wrong, and talk about things he doesn't know, or she knows that he won't know. So I don't know. I think it's more just a checkup. Let me just sort of follow and see what's happening here. She apparently doesn't know that she's doing this right at the time that he's going through these reintegration procedures with Ragabi. I don't know that she suspects something, or maybe she does. We'll have to see.
That's the thing. Maybe she does, because this comes right after Mark has the incident at work with the nosebleed
Yeah,
and loses time. So that question of, well, like, what happened for the rest of that workday? How weird was he? What kinds of things did he say? We don't know. We skipped with him from that scene where he's being attended to by Miss Wong
yeah.
to his basement with Ragabi. So,
And I'm sure Miss Wong brought that up the chain of, oh, this happened.
right.
I'm sure there's
So
protocols in place for that.
that's where it would make sense to me at one level, if Helena is going to check on Mark, see what's up with Mark. Maybe she's even wondering if Mark will recognize her, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly.
It's a really good scene, though.
It is a good scene.
Is
It
it
is a good
wrong, um, Ryan? Do you think it's wrong to, as the kids say, ship Helena and Audi Mark?
Oh boy. So now we're going to get into the quadruple or whatever this thing is here. Again, they seem to always do this where just in the same episode where you're maybe starting to feel some sense of empathy for Elena, that she, even though she's an outie, doesn't have much control of her own life, of her own body, of what she does. Um, get a sense of, well, I just want some connection and some emotion. Um, then you get, Helly's version of it, that, I have no control over my body. She dresses me. I want, that's her memory. I want my own. It's just sort of this, yeah, just, it's hard to balance sort of who you want. I mean, I'm clearly on Team Helly, but there are moments where I'm like, well, Elena just is almost a robot herself at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to me how they play with that and how much sympathy we have for Helena, how much sympathy we
Yeah.
can have
Yeah.
for Helena. And I certainly found it growing within myself. At the same time, this scene does kind of feel like she's just messing with Mark.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and there's something vaguely threatening about it. But does Mark, I mean, Mark ultimately does experience it as threatening. But part of me feels like she means it that way. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it is flirtatious. And
Yeah.
there are kind of some real sparks at play. And it's a really good scene. But yeah, as you mentioned, she gets Mark's wife's name wrong. How do you read that? I'm presuming it's intentional.
Yeah. I took it as nothing but intentional. Idea that I know everything. I know all. And I don't know, it almost put Mark in his place. Like despite this tragedy that you've had, it doesn't really matter much to me to care about that at your level. Like I'm the heir to this company. You're just the severed worker, for that sense of dominance. But again, it's hard to justify that with the sort of flirtatiousness of the conversation.
Right. So you could read it a slightly different way, as almost, well, I don't care about you that much. I'm not like
Right.
stalking you. I memorize your file. Yeah, I remember that your wife died, and that's sad. And oh, oops, sorry, I messed up her name. And it was like vaguely kind of close, to
Yeah.
say Hannah instead of Jenna. Um, Gemma. I think I just said Jenna. See,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
same difference. Whatever.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, but anyway, I'm curious to see where that goes. On the other side of things, um, the Mark and Helly Amy dynamic, where I mean, I appreciate that Mark felt he needed to tell Helly what had happened at the Orpo. And it's weird because I was a little bit surprised at how this played out, but it also made a lot of sense. What do you think?
Yeah. I was actually happy that this happened.
Yeah,
Happy that Helly has, at least in the hours that she has to herself, has taken over some control of her life in the last episode. And now in this one, despite sort of the shock of, oh my gosh, this is what happened and it wasn't me, comes to the sort of empowering realization that, well, I want something to make me happy too. So I'm gonna reach out and grab it and I'm gonna take it. As long as Marcus is down with it, which it seems like he was because he thought it was her before, I was happy for them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, God, it's so weird to think through the fact that Audi Helena had sex with Mark at the Ortbo, and now Innie Helly is having sex with Mark in the office, and
Yeah.
Audi Helena's flirting with Mark's Audi, who at the same time Mark is undergoing reintegration and having flashes back and forth. And in that
Yeah.
restaurant, maybe almost kind of sort of seems to feel like he knows Helena more than he should, and who knows, man. But
Yeah.
from the perspective of the innies, yeah, I'm with you that I thought it made a lot of sense, and um, it's kind of nice to have Heliar back.
Yes,
Props to
absolutely.
Britt Lauer, by the way. I mean, just to think about the felt differences between Innie Helly and Audi Helena. The fact that we clocked her basically from the beginning as
Yep.
that's Helena, that's not Helly. But the fact that now it really does feel like, oh yeah, that's Helly, that's the Innie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no real arrogance or and even not much confidence before the episode the what happens in this episode with Heliar. She's very um I don't know. She's just willing to be someone who lets others take over, willing to be someone who is, can support whenever needed. She's not sort of this dominant, I'm a Kier, or I'm an Egan, I can do whatever I want figure. She's just complete opposites, it seems like. We see that some in Dylan, we see that some in Mark, but I think maybe most strikingly it's with Heliar.
yeah. It's just also it's such a small difference, but also so um significant. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like one of them has a goatee. It's not like marked like that. But you can definitely tell, and with all of them, I mean, it's a running thing with all of the actors in the show who play both NEAs and Audis that
Yeah.
they all do this great job of coloring them with small differences, as it
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
Helly's position, where it's like, on the one hand, she's our favorite protagonist, but on the other hand, she's the main bad guy, makes her kind of really interesting in
Yeah,
the
I
show.
love it. I love it.
Let's see. Other things we didn't really talk about Milchek. I don't know how much there is to say about Milchek. Um,
Just seeing a couple people say that one scene might be his Emmy submission reel that that goes in. I mean, just to be able to act like that, staring at a mirror. I mean, it's just pretty impressive.
yeah, I mean it is great, and I'm curious though about where his overall arc is going.
Yeah.
You know, um, you know, is he really gonna stop using big words? I'd be a little bit disappointed.
I
I like my
yeah, with
Milchek saying things like, "You need to eradicate in yourself childish folly."
yeah, I do wonder is him doing this sort of doubling down on the commitment to Lumen, or is it defiantly doing what they want and having to practice just so he makes sure he gets it right, just so he can sort of play the part for a while.
Well, it's interesting in that scene how it seems like he goes from practicing using smaller words as though he's talking to Miss Wong
Hmm.
to it kind of shifting where it starts to feel like he's talking to himself
Yep,
when he's
exactly.
down to just saying grow,
Exactly.
grow, you know. Um, so definitely a good scene. I guess the thing is, he doesn't really interact with anyone in this episode other than Miss Wong briefly.
Yeah, that's right.
He just
Very, very briefly.
spends the episode getting paper clips on the right way and talking in the mirror. Um, yeah. Anything else you want to hit on here before we wrap up?
No, just one maybe small theory. Just in trying to leave no stone unturned, I couldn't help but look up what the name of the restaurant is that he leaves after he meets with that Mark leaves after he meets with Elena. It is
Okay.
Zufu, Zufu, which is interesting in Mandarin as a reference to grandfather. And so this is
Okay.
after a conversation where Mark and Helena have talked about meeting Helena's father, and Mark has now had, let's call it, two shots on goal to try and there's some people speculating that a pregnancy storyline is coming. I don't know. Obviously, we don't have any sense of that, but I don't know if that's coming, but that would be very, very complicated in the scope of this show.
You unfortunately made me wonder, like, are they cousins? Oh no.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not going in that direction. There is baby stuff, people have noted in the credits and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. I did want to mention, almost forgot here, in terms of the promotional tie-ins, this thing I sent to you right before we got on, which I think is still ongoing, was like 8 hour music to refine to featuring Odessa. People can find this on YouTube. I checked it out very briefly. It's like Severance music, but kind of remixed, and I don't know if people are familiar with this group, Odessa, whose name apparently refers to a sunken ship. So
Yeah.
they're putting those references in the music. Edmund Fitzgerald, and I don't know. Don't have much more to say about that, but people want to check that out. I don't know if you want to watch it for 8 hours, but
Just seems to be, yeah, some electronic music with some sporadic cuts of scenes from the show. Yeah.
yeah, there are visuals, right? I did before this. Apple TV had also put out a video that was just 8 hours of the Severance score on its own.
Yeah.
Like, do
Yeah.
you want to listen to that for 8 hours in the background? Do 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 do.
That would be a harrowing work day, I think.
But this is that. But then it's yeah, it's remixed, and I mean, I thought what I heard of it, saw of it, was pretty cool. But as I said to you before we got on, hard for me to imagine watching the video for 8 hours. Somewhat hard for me to imagine listening to the music for 8 hours in one
Yeah,
stretch, but
absolutely.
with that variance in there, maybe it would be worth listening to if you're into this kind of thing. If you're into that kind of electronic music as
Yeah, there
well.
there's no shortage of, let's call it, extracurricular promotional material for Severance these days. They're pumping it out pretty frequently.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
From the little Lumen promo videos to the Grand Central Station thing that they did, which there wasn't really much to consume there from
Yeah.
a distance, as it were, unless you went to Grand Central. But it's cool that they did it, and probably there'll be a little bit more before the season's
Yeah.
over. Probably there'll be more um, little videos with Miss Wong or Natalie or
Yeah. Yeah.
Milchett or that kind of thing. Um, all right, well, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks always for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please leave a good rating, review, all that kind of thing. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Much appreciated. Check out tvobsessive.com. You can find recaps of Severance from me each week, as well as articles on any number of other shows. Currently, I'm on Yellow Jackets as well. Ryan's on White Lotus. Um, Follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive. And we'll be back next week talking about Severance.
All right, episode 7 next week. See you then.